record on this computer. I sent you that last thing about Kiddushin in the beginning there, just because we've been sort of talking around it, and I sort of assume everybody knows the first Mishnah in Kiddushin, but we should take a look at it anyway. So just to have everybody on the same starting point. So maybe open up your Kiddushin. And turn to the first page bet. And it says like this. I'll read a little bit. Ha'isha niknet b'shalosh drachim, v'koneh et atzma b'shtei drachim. Now we're interested in the three ways that she is niknet. Niknet b'kesef, b'shtar, u'b'viyah. So she is acquired through kesef, shtar, and biyah. That's the Mishnah. Sorry, yes, I almost wiped out the whole thing by saying shlosha. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, and then I want to skip to the Gemara, and then it says kesef. I'm sort of going to do a little bit of jumping around here. So if it's useful to have the actual book, but because if you look at the bottom, 4 lines from the bottom, the kesef minala. How do we know kesef? So this is the first drasha. Gemar kicha b'stei Ephron. We learn the acquisition, the kicha. We learn a comparison of kicha by Shtei Ephron and another kicha. Kicha b'stei Ephron. Ketiv hacha, and it's written here. Ki yikach ish isha. It says you should when a man takes a woman. Now it's interesting to what that whole pasuk is. That pasuk, I looked in the concordance, and there's several kichas going around in the world, in the Torah. That pasuk is ki yikach ish isha ubala v'haya im lo timsachen be'inav. He doesn't like her. Ki matzah ba'erva stavmar v'katav la sefer kritut v'natan b'yada v'shilcha mibeita. And he sends her out after giving her the get. V'yatz mibeita v'halcha v'haita le'ishacher. And she went out and went to another man and was to another man. Now, the beginning is, what I just read is, ki yichach ish isha ubal. If a man takes a woman and has marital relations with her. Now, if you just read that pasuk on its own, yikach, you took the woman. I don't know what that means. I would have no idea what that means. And I'll just drive the point home, in Vayikra, this I didn't give you, but I'll just read it. I'll just tell you. In Vayikra, I didn't give in chapter 20, I didn't write down the source, but in chapter 20, it says, V'ish asher yikach et achoto. This is talking about these are the ervas, and you're not allowed to marry your sister. So it says, Ish asher yikach et achoto. It says the word yikach. Now, I don't know what it means there. It means marriage, probably, or some kind of kicha. And then it says, in Devarim, ki yichach ish isha. This is, I don't know why they don't use this pasuk. This is a great pasuk in Devarim 22:13. Ki yichach ish isha uba eleha, and he comes to her. It's very similar to the set language of ubala with an ayin. Bala means he marries her. Here it means uba eleha. He comes to her, but it's the same basic meaning. And we have another one in Devarim 23. Lo yichach ish et eshet aviv. A man shouldn't take his father's wife. So you see that the word taking seems to be about taking, make marriage, some kind of marriage. And what occurs to me is, what is that Rambam that we read a few weeks ago? That we read this Rambam that says, before Matan Torah, you would just take a woman into your house. But once we have the Torah, what is this? How do you marry a woman? By kiddushin. But doesn't it seem like that before the Torah type of circumstance is actually what the Torah is talking about? The Torah never. If I would just read the Torah and I would just be a choker of the Mikra, and I would not be a rabbinic scholar. I would just look at this and I would just say, it doesn't talk about Kiddushin. It just talks about taking a woman, and that's called marriage. Just like the Rambam describes that it was before the Torah was given. Just making that point. So then it becomes up to the rabbis to create this concept of kinyan that has before. Here's my point. People, what's Joel's agreeing? You think, is this obvious? Is this interesting? Is this wrong?
Since you're asking me, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's an interesting question of when it says, ki, you said there's like several places where it's just, ish kachet isha, right? Where, like in the Arayot and so forth. But here, like where it has ki kach ish isha uve'ala or ki kach isha uva ileha, right? All of those sound like you could read that as a two-step process, right? I think it leaves
exactly.
open.
No, I do read it as a two-step process.
You do?
The first, okay. I do read it as a two-step process. The first step is taking her into your house, chuppah, and the second step is bia. But there's no kinyan. There's just, the Rambam said, I'm just remembering the Rambam. If you remember the Rambam, he just says, before Matan Torah, a man met a woman in the shuk and took her into his house. And that was marriage. Yeah. And the Torah came along and says, no, there's kinyan. Before you take it, can't just take it into your house. And what I'm pointing out is that the Torah, on a simplistic reading, on a, it doesn't seem to, seems to be describing that same mitziut, that same reality that the Rambam says pertained to before Matan Torah. But of course, right. That was my point. I do think it's a two-step process. I think the bia is later, after first taking it to your house. So let's go back to wait. So any other comments on that? Sarah, you have a thought? No? Okay. Those are just my thoughts. Maybe it's all obvious and I'm wasting your time, but yeah.
Just a quick technical question. When you were going through the Sukkim, you said, I don't know why they didn't use this one. And for me, in my version of the Gemara, it just says ki kach ish isha. So it could have been that one, just as well as the one. Is that based but like the Torah Hashem made some decision which pasuk it was going to cite for that? Is that?
You're right.
How much authority does that have?
I was as I was saying my words, I thought of your kasha. Yes, exactly. It's not clear, except if you turn to page Gimel Amud Bet. If you turn to page, Dalet Amud Bet, and you see the two dots at the top of the page, and then the last two words on the line, the Tanya. You see, it's like 4 or 5 lines, 5 lines down from the top. It says the Tanya, and now we have the drasha again. And here it says, Ki yichach ish isha ubala. And here it does finish the sentence. So the Masoras Hashas it has basis. He's basing it on this drasha. But there's a difference between the drashas. Actually, I want to look at the difference in the drashas. So I don't know why I'm doing this. In other words, we're supposed to be learning halacha, and I'm doing like mechkar of the Talmud here. But I want to show you the comparison of the two drashas. I just think it's important. It's that you should be excited about what you're learning about, and I'm excited about this. So maybe it'll rub off. The kesef. So let's go back. Let's go back to Bet, back to Amud Bet, and let's look at that because we didn't finish. It says, Gemar kicha mistei Ephron, v'kativ hacha ki yichach ish isha, v'kativ hatam, v'natati hakesef. It says, a man takes a woman, presumably uba'ala, v'kativ hatam, and it also says by Abraham, v'natati hakesef hasadeh kach mimen, which is a weird pasuk because that's actually talking about him taking the money and not Abraham taking the field. But then it goes on, the kika ichre kinyan, and kika is called kinyan, diktiv, the hasadeh asher kana Abraham. So much later, later in Bereshit, much later, it says that this is the field that Abraham bought. So you see that he was buying it over there, and he gave money, and it's called a kinyan. And then he goes,
Maybe this ties into what you had us prepare also for today in some of the other sources, in that it's called a kinyan because what was taken and kept. It wasn't a conditional take this and I'll give you something later. It wasn't take this in exchange for hold on to something. It was you've taken this, and by taking this you've committed to it. So by you committing to taking that, I now own what I bought for it.
in other words, the taking of the money makes him now take the field.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he just brings another pasuk, inami sadot b'kesef yikneh. You just see that fields are bought with money, and that's called kinyan. So what is this drasha saying? That there's a comparison between taking a woman and taking a field, and taking a field is called a kinyan, and it's done with money, so therefore you can marry a woman with money. It's a little bit of a convoluted drasha. Let's look at the same version of that drasha.
Rav Nachum?
Yeah.
You can tell it's convoluted because the Gemara actually has to present an alternative to it, right? If you go to the next Amud, right, it brings a verse from Yirmiyahu to prove it. Sadot bakesef yiknu, because it's I don't know, I always see that as the case where the Gemara is like, we don't love this proof. It's like it's good, but it's not.
Well, what's the problem? What's my problem with this proof? My problem is essentially that the word kach here is not referring to Abraham buying it. And that isn't solved by the Yirmiyahu either, really. It just says the kinyan, that's just a teaching that kinyan, that the kicha is called kinyan. And then kinyan is with kesef. It's, in other words...
The Yirmiyahu is much shorter. It's just saying that kinyan happens with kesef, and whereas the other one we had to go from, like, we know that Abraham is giving kesef, and that uses the word kach, and that connects to
but the problem with the Yirmiyahu is it doesn't have the word kach. It doesn't connect to a woman in any way, because it just says that the fields are bought with money. But how do I know? I have to have kicha. The drasha is kicha. I have the word kach here and the word kach there. So let's jump. So let's look at the other drasha on Daled Amud Bet, where we were before. And it's pretty much the same thing. 4 lines from the top. I'm going a bit fast here. Katanya ki yikach ish isha ubala vaya im lo timsachen beinav ki yimtza ba ervas davar the ein kicha ela bekesef. So that's saying when that man is buying or marrying a woman, it's with kesef. The kenu omer natati kesef asadei kach minute. So, and kich, what's missing from this drasha? This drasha is different from the other drasha. Missing's a part. Shorter.
It's missing the kinyan piece.
It's missing the kinyan piece. So here's the question. I was discussing this with Isaac Landis yesterday. Here's the question, because they learned this sugya all last year, and I'm doing like now. So I was discussing with him. I was arguing with him because the question is, what is the drasha? Is the drasha that we learn kinyan from Abraham, and that you have to do a kinyan, or is the drasha that we learn kesef? In other words, if we learn kinyan from Abraham, then we have all three. We say every way that a field can be bought, so a woman can be bought. It's kinyan by field, kinyan by woman. Therefore, all the types of kinyans that are valid by a field, which is kesef shtar, and bia of course wouldn't be, but kesef shtar, maybe chalifin, maybe chazaka, all those things would, and maybe we're going to learn why not chazaka and why not chalifin, but really they're all brought in immediately from once we do that first drasha. But if you look at the second, but in the second drasha that I brought in Daf Dalet, it seems like all we're interested in is learning is that it can be done with kesef. And the whole idea of kinyan, we somehow is presumed, is never actually learned. We're just saying that, yes, of course you have to marry a woman with a kinyan, and now we're just saying that kinyan, which is kicha, Obviously, kicha is kinyan. That's sort of obvious to us. We're just wondering what types of kinyan, and the drasha is teaching us that kesef is a valid form of kicha, which of course kicha means kinyan. But we're not that idea that kicha is kinyan is assumed out of nowhere.
I don't know if it's assumed so much as like this is how we're defining what kinyan is. Like why?
It doesn't have the
why
word kinyan here. There's no the word
Yep.
kinyan here. It doesn't appear.
right,
Or
but
the-
no,
or the
kinyan,
pasuk about-
kinyan is a word we're applying to what's going on. You could just say kicha.
In other words, that kicha that we described that from the Chumash seems like it's just bringing it into your house.
From this other place, we learn that kicha has to do
We
with
learn
money.
that kicha is with kesef, and therefore
And
it's kinyan.
Well,
No,
the
kicha is
pasuk with
kesef.
Avram.
We learn
the
that
pasuk with
kicha is
Avram
kesef.
teaches
That's
Kicha
what
is
you do.
kesef.
That's what you do to
Ah.
a woman before you.
And maybe it's not kinyan at all. Maybe it's
Wait.
kicha.
Right,
it's
it's
just
kicha,
kicha,
and then like
kicha's
after
with
we
kesef.
want to give it a name, we're gonna name it kinyan.
I understand what you're saying. Nice shot. Nice waves.
Well, the pasuk from Avram is telling us that kinyan equals kicha equals kinyan. That's what the pasuk from Avram
Only in the first drasha on daf, the first way we learned it. On the first one on daf bet, that's the way it is. But here it's different. I'm just pointing there's a difference, and I think this difference comes out in a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Actually, this is what I'm going to get to, which is and wait. Now that's the. By the way, if we're as long as we're on daf daled on a bet, just look down. I just want to get these drushes clear. If you look down on the page. About 10 lines from the bottom, the first word on the line is ubala. You see that? That's the continuation of the first word on the line is ubala. And that word is ubala milamed shniknet bebia. So from the word bala, we learn ki yikach isha ubala. It sounds like it's stages, right? Yikach isha and then bala. The Gemara says no, it's not stages, it's alternatives. It's two different ways of marrying, which is also a bit of a drush. It's not the simple pshat. Ubala means bia. That's the drasha for bia. And I just want to show you the third drasha for star. That's on Hey Amud Aleph. I'm cutting out all of the. I'm being the riff here. I'm cutting out all of the Gemara that is not actually the drasha. So if you look on Hey. About 5 lines from the top. The first word on the line is shnei or shnei, maser sheni. First word on is sheni, but on the end of the line, so it's 5 lines down on daf hey amud aleph. Amar kra v'yatsa v'haisa. It says there's a pasuk. This is like kitzer of the pasuk. Pasuk is v'yatsa. We already read that. I think a pasuk. V'yatsa mi'ish hazeh. The haisa ish acher. That was the pasuk that I read to you in the beginning of the shir today. He went out from one. She went out from one man, and she was to another man. V'haisa. So we say makish havaya liyitzia. We connect the going out to the going in. Well, the going in to the going out. Ma yitzia, just like going out, which is get, as leaving a man means you have to get a get. Bishtar, that's the get. Af havaya nami bishtar. Also going towards a man can be done by a shtar. So that's how we have 3 drushes from, well, it's all from the same pasuk, right? It's all from the same pasuk. You think about it, it's all one pasuk. It's an amazing pasuk. God wrote a great pasuk there that gives you everything. I read the pasuk again. It's Devarim Kaf 24 Aleph. Ki yichach ish isha ubala. There's the yikach. Ubala, that's the bia. V'haisa im timsa chen, im lo timsa chen beinav ki matzah ba'eres dava. V'katav la sefer krisus. V'natan biyada v'shilcha v'beso v'yatsa me'beso v'halcha v'haita. Actually, it's 2 psukim. Sorry, it's Aleph and Bet. V'yatsa me'beso v'halcha v'haita l'ishacher. It's 2 psukim, but they're one right after the other. So it's like one long pasuk. Okay, so that's the third drasha. Now, I promised you a machlokas Rashi. Tosfos, where is it? It's Daf Gimel. Wait a second. It's Daf Gimel. Where's the Rashi?
Oh,
Okay.
the Rashi is on the next page.
So is that Gimel Amud Aleph or Amud Bet?
Amud Aleph.
It's I think it's on Gimel Amud Bet though, on the first
The
one. the
Rashi
first
comes at
Rashi
the
on
top
that
of
stuff.
a bit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So wait, let's just look at this Tosfos here on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. I mean, we can let's look at the Rashi. I guess we should probably, if we're conscientious learners, look at the Gemara. So yeah, Minyana, here's the two dots in the Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Minyana, the number, Dereisha the Mutemai. What's the number? Why does it say 3 ways that a woman can be married? What, as though there's a 4th way that we want to say is not valid. So we say like this: Minyana the Seifa. That doesn't Minyana. That doesn't interest me. The Minyana the Seifa the Mutemai Minyana. So that we ask the second question. But now back to the first question. The Reisha, what's the number in the ratio of 2? The Meute Chuppah, to exclude Chuppah, that you cannot marry with simply Chuppah. Of course, that's right. Just to be clear, the Mishnah knows that Chuppah is not there. How does the Mishnah know that Chuppah is not there? How does the Mishnah know that Chuppah is not there? It's true the Mishnah is coming to tell us that Chuppah is not one of the ways. But how does the Mishnah know that it's not one of the ways? Very simple answer.
Well, we can learn it from the pasuk, right?
Right. We don't have a pasuk to teach us that. Even though I would claim that that's the basic shot of the pasuk. It is chuppah, because that's what yikach really means. But now we've said no, yikach means something else, and we don't have chuppah. So the Mishnah now is coming to educate us and tell us only 3 ways that we shouldn't make the mistake and think that there is a drasha for chuppah, but really there's no drasha for chuppah. So it's not really like they're thinking that there's a drasha for chuppah. It's that's what it's good. Now we say the Rav Huna, but Rav Huna says the Amar Chuppah Kone Mikal V'Chomer. He says it does work. So he has this drasha that it works. The Meute Mai. So why? Which is a little bit weird, because then if Chuppah works, then there should be 4 in the Mishnah. But anyway, why does he? What is it excluding? The Meute Mai, the Meute Chalifin, to tell us that Chalifin doesn't work. Okay, for sure Chalifin doesn't work because we don't have a drasha. But the Mishnah is coming to tell us, don't think that Chalifin might work. So why would you think Chalifin works? Hoil the Gamar kicha kicha mistefra. Maybe we do have a drasha for it. So here's the how we did think that there was a drasha for it. Now this, by the way, is relevant to our Siman, this Chalifin. Hoil the Gamar kicha kicha mistefra. Maste Ephron mekanya bechalifin. Just like a field can be bought. Sorry, I added the word Ephron. Masadei mekanya bechalifin. Afishanami mekanya bechalifin. We think that all the things that apply to a field apply to a woman. Why? I want to claim that that's the drasha of Amud Bet, not the drasha of Amud Dal, where we use the word kinyan. And once we say kinyan, we're going to put everything in, also Khalifin, also anything that works by a few.
So hold on a second. It's a quick question. So according to the first opinion, right? The numbers in the Resha is Lemiute Chalipin and to Lemiute Chuppah, right? It's just according to Runa, it's just okay, fine.
Yes. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that Khalifin doesn't work. Right. Yes. So you might think that the drasha on Amud Bet is teaching us all forms of kinyan work. Kamash Malan, that it doesn't. But that's not what that drasha is. Ve'ema hachanami, and maybe we should say Khalifin works, because maybe that is maybe the drasha is really including all kinds of kinyan. Ema hachanami. And then we answer, I know this is kind of famous statement, Itnahu b'pachos mishava pruta. So how do you read this? Itnahu. There is such a thing as Khalifin with less than a pruta, which means not always with less than a pruta, but it could be with less than a pruta. And if we would include it, then we would include all forms of chalipin, and some kinds of chalipin are worth less than a sheva pruta. But sheva pachos b'sheva pruta lo mikanya nafsha. She won't agree to marry.
But you can make this same argument with kesef, right? You can make the same argument with money, right? The argument is kind of odd, right? Because
well, no, by money, by money we have a minimum shear. A shear is a pruta. That's the minimum shear. That's like our kazayit.
The argument is that you could have a kinyan with the chalipin that's pachol meshaver pruta, right? Therefore, we exclude all chalipin because we don't want to have to worry about it. Same thing apply with money. You could have a kinyan with kesef with less than a shaver pruta. So why don't we?
No, you can't. No, you can't.
In any way, shape, or form, you can't.
No, you can't. You can't have a kinyan. No, it's like saying it's if you have less than a kazayas of bread, you don't bench. So if you don't have if you don't have the measure of kesef, you can't do kinyan. Kinyan kesef requires a pruta. It's not called money if it's less than a pruta. It's like saying a penny. A penny is the smallest amount of money. You can't buy something for a half a cent. There's no such thing. So you can't buy something for less than a pruta. But of course, I thought you were going to say something different, which is maybe what Sarah's thinking. I thought you were going to say, well, wait a second, a woman would marry herself for a pruta? It's like a penny, it's nothing. Well, what's the difference between a half a pruta and a pruta? They're both basically nothing. So what's the Gemara saying?
Plus you have Shtar sitting in the background of, sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean to.
No, I was going to say the same thing. It seems like Shtar is actually the more complicated case because it seems like, right, what's going on in a chalifin isn't really like a straightforward kinyan. It's just like another mechanism. And you can like kiddushin with a shtar, where the shtar itself is like physically worth less than shabbos pruta, still works because it's a different mechanism. So why
she's not interested in money, and maybe chalifin is also
maybe chalifin is just like a different way to buy things. It has nothing to do with the money, and like who cares how much it is.
Yeah. First of all, I want to give a little shear on chalifin, a short shear on chalifin, which is based on a Gemara in Baba Metzia Mem Zayin. Which I didn't give you to read because it's getting too far. Basically, we're learning Hilchot Kiddushin, and I wanted to state that. But really, Hilchot Kiddushin encompasses with it Gittin, because Shtar is Gittin, and encompasses within it Mammon, Dinei Mammonos, because we're talking about money, and now we have to talk about types of kinyan. So really, there's a huge sugya here. But anyway, in Mem Zayin, in Baba Metzia, I recommend reading that whole chapter, in fact. But it says that basically chalifin is originally like, I have a cow and you have a donkey, and I say, I like your donkey, and you say, I like your cow, and we are machlif. We're no backsies. We trade. You take one and I take the other, and that's it. And that's chalifin. That is the classic chalifin, and it's not. And in fact, it's not a monetary. You can have it with the Gemara. There talks about, well, what if he meant it only if there's also with a reasonable monetary price? In other words, maybe if the animal dies in the middle before I got it, then you still owe me the money because there is some kind of money going on in the background. But really, chalifin is an exchange, like the word says, of A for B. And the presumption is that they're not exactly the same value. And yet I'm going to do this. I'm not doing shaveh b'shaveh. So what is kinyan suder, someone asks? So kinyan suder is a form of chalipin, where we sort of denatured it. If you like, you denature flour, I don't know. We've denatured it. We've said, well, chalifin works in an exchange. I can exchange a pen for a piece of paper. We do that with, like, when we want to own the rabbi wants to makne the ketubah to the chatan. So when the rabbi maknes the ketubah, so the Chatan lifts up a pen, and so then he's acquiring. He's taking the pen from the rabbi. The rabbi basically gave him a pen. He lifts it up, and that's sort of a chalip. Now, chalip. I should say one more thing. The cow and the sheep. When does the kinyan occur? When I take the cow, or only after you also take the goat, or the sheep? Is it after both? So the answer is it's after the first one. As soon as I take the animal, one side of the transaction occurs. It's a complete transaction. You now owe me the other animal. You have to give it to me. But the kinyan is a kinyan at that moment, in the sense that I own that cow now, and you own the other thing. You have to take it, but you own it. You're the owner, even before you took it. So simply by doing one side of the chalipin, you've made an acquisition. So when he lifts up the pen, he acquires he's done the kinyan chalipin. And now the pen is irrelevant. I could give it as a gift back to the rabbi. So that's what we do usually. In other words, that's why it goes back. So that's kinyan suder. Kinyan suder is this kind of fake chalipin where we take the pen and then we acquire the whatever thing we're trying to acquire by sort of agav the pen. We lift up the pen and with it we take anything else. In the same way that if you bought a house, you would get the furniture. So you lift up the pen and now you get the whole acquisition. Now the pen is irrelevant, you can give it back. That's kinyan suder.
Basically, right?
What?
It's a symbolic exchange. Basically.
Yeah, it's a symbolic. Well, but it could be. And Tosa says that you don't have to give it back. It's really yours. Yeah, Yavi.
It sounds like it's the opposite of the chalifin, right? Chalifin is that they have to exchange, whereas what you described about the pen was that I'm taking the pen as and along with it, I'm also taking the ketubah.
You're right. It's a little. You're right. You're always when I'm thinking of myself and I'm saying it, I understand exactly this problem. Yeah, and I didn't explain it great. But yeah, I think it's not an opposite. You're saying that I'm entertaining this problem. Why doesn't the chatan give something back to the maybe I'm explaining it a little bit wrong, but I think I'm explaining it right. If anyone has a comment to correct me, but I think
could it be a different thing? Like there's also this idea that it sounds to me like it's a different mechanism. Like you need to have a meshicha, but you're doing a meshicha on two objects together, so you don't have to do them for whatever reason. You don't want to, I don't know why you don't just pick up the ketubah, but
right. Why do you just pick up the ketubah and then you own the ketubah?
But you don't own it in the first place. You can't just pick it up, right? You have to exchange it for something. I guess the ketubah belongs to someone else, and by doing the kinyan suder, you're kind of like acquiring it.
But then how can you pick up the pen? Like it's the same thing.
All right, I have to think about it more. I have to research it more. This is a point that I did not fully investigate. So I'll get back to you on it. I don't know. But I don't know exactly, but the point of kinyan suder is that it's like the chalifin that I described, but there's no actual, the value of the items are irrelevant, are negligible, right? Because we also have this rule like this, that if it's a kli, a pen is a kli. So even if it's a kli, even if it's worth less than a pruta, it would still be a valid form of chalipin. That's what we said before, that a chalifin could be with less than a pruta. Because if I do exchanges, if I exchange my lollipop with your lollipop, it could be worth less than a pruta. It could be I bought 3 lollipops for 1 pruta. But I can exchange, and that's called a valid kinyan. So too with the pen. It has value, could be very little, as long as it's a kli. A rock wouldn't work, but a pen would work. Some people use a baseball. I don't know why, but okay, so wait a second. So I want to look at this Tosfot.
Sorry, just a quick question before we move forward. So could a handshake technically qualify as a chalipin?
Why? I didn't, if I took skin off your hand, what did I
No,
take off?
it's just symbolic. That's what it is, right? We said the
No, it's
Chalipin
not symbolic. I don't like the word
Like we
symbolic.
exchange symbolically because like the later on we'll exchange.
No,
the
it's not
actual
symbolic.
value, right?
Again, it's not symbolic. I don't like the word symbolic. Nothing is symbolic. It's not symbolic. It is a real kinyan. And
but
I
according to-
now own that pen.
But if you can't keep it, if you don't go
I
according to
could keep it. I could keep it. We give it back. It's like when you do pidyon haben. Sometimes the Kohen gives back the coins an hour later but you're not supposed to do it right away. In other words, it's his coins now. The Kohen owns those coins. If he chooses to give it back, that's his prerogative. But I don't think that the pen, you could keep it. Well, let's look at the Tosfos. V'isha. I think it'll be a little bit clearer if we look at the Tosfos. So the last Tosfos here. V'isha, well, actually, maybe, would somebody want to read it? I've been talking a lot. Prefer I continue? I didn't assign it, so I'll continue. Isha b'pachos misheva pruta lo makne nafshe. Perish b'kantris mishum deganaihu la. Hilchach batil la Torah's chalifin b'kiddushin. So it's a ganaihu, and therefore chalifin doesn't work in kiddushin. It's batil. Va'afilu b'kli sheyesh ba sheva pruta. Even if it's a kli that is valuable, like a pen that has worth the sheva pruta, I yahivla Torah's chalifin. He gives it to her as a kind of chalifin. He gives her the pen and says, "I'm giving you the pen. Now you give me yourself." Sort of as a king. Because it's batel, because she wouldn't have done it if it was less than a value. So the whole type of kinyan doesn't work, even if the item is valuable. V'kasha l'Rabbeinu Tam. De'im kain pashta yada v'kabla mitkadesh. If that's the logic, then if she took out her hand and accepted it, then apparently it's not a ganai for her, and then it should work. It's not embarrassing. She accepted it, so then it should work. It should be dependent on the opinion of the woman. Why are you going to ruin the whole form just because sometimes she might not do it? De'im kain pashta yada v'kabla mitkadesh pachot misheva pruta. Should work. Va'od kevan ditali taima mishum the ganaihu. If you're going to say the whole problem is that it's a ganai, im kain amailo parich begemara benitanya de Rabbi Yanai, with the daughters of Rabbi Yanai, the kapdu anafshayu, that they were very rich girls, and they were makpid on themselves. They held themselves in high regard. Below mekadshe mitar kaba the dinare. They wouldn't marry for less than a pitcher full of dinners. So it's a barrel full of dinners. So then if that's the problem, then maybe kesef shouldn't work or pruta shouldn't work. But ki hechi de parich the common, like we asked later. Amilta the Beit Shammai va'od kasha kevan de salchadaycha hashta lemigmar kinyana isha mikinyana sadeh. Now here's getting to my point. Since now we're thinking to learn kinyan of a woman from kinyan of a sadeh, im kain isha nami tiknei behazaka. Let the woman marry by hazaka, and let her marry by khalif. Why only khalifin? Why are we saying only khalifin? If the whole concept here must be, how are we getting a drasha for khalifin? Only because we were saying all forms of kinyan will work, just like a field. So should also be chazaka, which works by a field. Why did the Gemara only entertain one option of chalifin? Va'od the lekaman boy Gemara b'shtar min nalan. My boy the Gemara misade. Why are we asking about this shtar from Havaya to Yitzia? We should just know it she's from all forms of kinyan. that we learned, just like the drasha on Daf Bet. I mean, I'm adding that in. This is my nikuda here. My point here is that Tosos is, the question is ultimately which drasha you look at. I mean, I'm sort of answering this question. Now he says, look at the answer. Lekach nira l'Rabbeinu Tam the Garcinan pachot misheva pruta lo maknya v'lo garis nafsha. He doesn't include the word nafsha. In other words, we're not saying that it's her personal disdain for a half a pruta. We're saying that it's lo maknya. It doesn't work. We're just saying objectively that pachot misheva pruta doesn't work. And what's the point? The lo bikpei de talia milsa. The Indian is not dependent on her personal hakpada, her personal what her attitude is. Ella haima mishum de gamar kichikika miste Ephron de ketiv be kesef upachot mishavek pruta lo mikre kesef. The whole drasha is not kinyan. The drasha is kesef. V'hamakshe shehiksha tchila, and the questioner that asked in the beginning, Ema hachanami shtar v'hazaka. Why don't say shtar and hazaka? Why don't we also say shtar and hazaka work from the kinyan of Abraham and the field? So that was his question.
Wait, it's saying why don't we also reject shtar and chazaka for the same reason?
He's going back and answering his original questions. His original question was, why don't we learn hazaka, and why do we need to have a drasha for shtar? And he's going to say, lo hazaka lo hiksha daha pshita de lo gamrinan kicha la sot isha kikol inyana desade. We're for sure not saying that a woman is like a field in every way, acquirable like a field, and therefore there's no kasha. Why did we have a drasha to teach us shtar? Because we have no other way of knowing shtar, because there's no connection to a field, and that tells us that we have no. So why is it that we're learning? Why is it that we're learning a khalifin then? Not because of a field. He's gonna have to explain. Ulahachi boyalan lekaman bishtar. That's why we. Sorry, that's still on the previous point. That's why we had to get a drasha for shtar minala. Where's the source? Because we delogamrina nisade. Because we don't learn it from field. Because we're only learning kesef from field. Ela lekesef dafka. Only learning kesef. Bikativ beikicha v'lo parich. Oh, and now he's asking. But now, so then the question is, what's the parich from Khalifin? V'lo parich Khalifin ela mishum dahave ke'ein kesef. The point of Khalifin is that we thought Khalifin is kesef. It is kesef. Why? Dikara sheyesh b'sheva pruta. Because, dahave ke'ein kesef dikra. It is like the kesef that the Torah is talking about by Abraham. Why? Sheyesh behen sheva pruta, because usually Khalifin has a sheva pruta. V'hachi perusho emas hachinami shetikat, and this is what the Gemara is saying. Ema hachinami shetikadesh isha b'Khalifin ksheyesh ba'ota Khalifin sheva pruta kein kesef. The Gemara is saying, let it Khalifin work only when the Khalifin is worth the Sheva Pruta. Because then it comes under the general heading of Kesef. Yeah, you understand? So he's saying there's only Kesef. And when the Gemara is talking about Khalifin, it's because Khalifin is a kind of Kesef. And that's what the Gemara answers, but it's not. Because sometimes Khalifin is with a half a Pruta. And Kinyan Kesef, this is back to what Reuben was saying, what I was saying to Reuben actually, that Kinyan Kesef has to be with a Pruta. And since Khalifin also works when you have a half a Pruta, or less than a Pruta, then it can't be under the general heading of Kesef. And I want to point out that this I think I think Tosos is right, but I think that Rashi is learning differently. Rashi is learning the way I learned it 20 years ago, which is that Kesef Kedushin is the Kicha Kicha Mistei Ephraim is teaching us that all the valid ways to marry a woman are like a field. Or like say, like all the valid ways that a field work for marriage. And that's kind of the way, and that's based on the first Russian. But whatever, I mean, because that's what Rashi's saying. Rashi's saying is somehow Khalifin should work because it works by a field, but because it's a Ganai, it doesn't work. I mean, I don't understand, you know, maybe Rashi really doesn't argue. I generally like to say that when Tosfos argues on Rashi, really Rashi agrees with him. He just, or in some way agrees with him, but Tosfos didn't quite understand that. But it seems to me like it's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, which is the Iker Drasha on Daf Bet or Daf Daled. But my point is, I think my concluding point is that Khalifin, according to Tosfos, and I think correctly, is only understood to be possibly working because it's a form of kesef, and it's rejected because we realize that the correct definition of Khalifin is as a completely different type of kinyan, and therefore has no shaykhs to kesef. Yeah, Sarah.
I'm wondering, maybe this is a way to make Rashi and Tosfot agree, because Rashi seems to say that the problem with Khalifin is not that she would end up accepting an amount that's less than Shevei Pruta, and that's the Gnai. The Gnai is Khalifin itself, right? Because he says, no, hold on a second. ואפילו בכלי שיש בו שווה פרוטה, יהיב לה בלשון חליפין, עד שיהיב לה בתורת לשון קניין, או קיחה, או קידושין. So like,
let's read it from the beginning again. We're on the Amud Bet.
That's the rest.
Right?
Yeah. Right. So
read it from the beginning again. The Ganaihu.
Right. The Ganaihu la. Hilkach batil la toras chalifin b'kedushin. So the whole like sort of concept of halifin is just like doesn't work for kedushin. Va'afilu b'kli sheyesh bo shavei pruta. Even in a case where the thing that you're doing the halifin with is of shavei pruta. So the problem isn't that there's this like, you know, special case where she might accept halifin with less than shavei pruta. The whole thing is a problem. Like the whole way of thinking about halifin just like doesn't apply here. Which is sort of what Tosfot is saying, because Tosfot is basically saying like we don't. This mechanism doesn't apply, even though it does apply.
In other words, Khalifin. If I can paraphrase you or restate what you're saying, maybe is that Khalifin, it's a Ganaihu. She goes back to her friends and says, I got married today. Oh, really? What type of kinyan was it? Oh, it was Khalifin. And then she realizes that she's a little bit embarrassed about that because even though she got a diamond ring in Khalifin, the type of kinyan is like a kind of kinyan that people think of as like a garnished. This is not a very small amount, it could be. And so therefore it's a Ganaihu to her because she got that ring not as kesef, but as a Khalifin. And so she has to tell everybody she got married by Khalifin, and that's like not valid. So therefore what? So therefore, right,
even if she had done the Khalifin with something nice, it wouldn't have worked. So there's something wrong with Khalifin kind of generally, which shows that it's not a sort of subset of kesef where like we're worried that they're just going to do
why do we care that it's a Ganai? What do we care that it's a Ganai?
Separate thing that's Ganai, and that's why we have to get rid of it for Rashi. For Tosfot, Khalifin's also something separate we have to get rid of.
Well, why don't we say it's a Ganai to eat only a kazayit of bread, therefore you have to take 2 kazayits. I mean, well, might be told that a Ganai has any value in ruining, if it's a real limud. In other words, if it's a real limud, why is the Ganai going to get us out of it? Just because it's a Ganai. You see what I'm saying? If we theoretically had a pasuk that told us Khalifin works, you say, yeah, but it's a Ganai, so we
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
I'm saying Ganai seems like a strange method of invalidating a limud. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but maybe not in this case, right? Because like this is the only, I mean, maybe Eved Ivri is like the only other place, but like most of what we buy do a kinyan on are not people.
Wait,
So like, I don't really
wait,
care if it's Gnai to the like donkey.
but another question. According to Rashi, why do we even entertain the possibility of Khalifin? We don't have a drasha for it. Why did we think to even use it?
Well, I think it's like the Havamina is that we might have, it's basically Tosfot Havamina. We might have thought that all the ways that work for Sadeh work for Isha. But that's not true because some of them are too like, they're just like not nice.
Well, maybe Rashi is thinking what Tosfos says, but he should have said it out. he didn't really say it so well, if that's what he meant. In other words, if he meant to say that it's not really what Tosfos' main point is that the Gemara is saying that we thought Khalifin was a type of kesef. And then we said it's not a type of kesef. You're saying maybe Rashi thought that we learned all the Sadeh out, all the Sadeh things, and then we decided we don't. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is like nobody talks about chazaka. Like if you follow Rashi's shita, somebody should be like, okay, but what about chazaka?
Well, it's my shita and Rashi. I don't say it's Rashi. It's my opinion of Rashi.
Okay, fine, right.
It's a problem. It's a kasha on me. But then you're left with understanding what's Rashi really thinking. I mean, I was just trying to explain Rashi, but my explanation is that he went by the other drasha, and then I have a different kasha on him, which is why not chazaka. Yeah. Wait, Masha, you had a question.
Well, I'm just wondering, I have several questions. The first of which is that I'm surprised that we think that the Khalifin would be potentially in a value less than Shaveh Chuta, which didn't even occur to me at all in the reading. But now I'm wondering if the real problem with Khalifin is that it's something that fluctuates in value potentially so much that the purpose of the kinyan is undermined. That what we want is to give her an actual thing that is worth at least this much money. And then if it's something that could be so volatile or couldn't be easily transacted, then
we want to guarantee her a certain minimum amount of money for this major undertaking. And if we would permit Khalifin, well, but the problem you'd have with this explanation is what about Shtar and Bia? There she doesn't get anything.
she gets hana'a.
Yeah, well, the Shtar, she doesn't get anything.
Well, but the shtar has a fixed value, right? So that probably
No, the Shtar is not the ketubah. The Shtar is just like Hare at mikudeshet li, and then you hand it to her, and you write it on a piece of broken pottery, or on a piece of paper, and that's it. You just write Hare at mikudeshet li, and you hand her the paper. That's Shtar.
I retract my.
Wait, Yavni, you want to say?
Oh wait, Masha, did you have another question? Can we go back? I know you started with this, but what is Khalifin and how is it different from Kesef in terms of what it actually is?
Well, you see, it's like this. First of all, there's a couple of things. I'll say one point, which I said before, which is that everything in Judaism, for it to work, has to have a shear in general. It'd be like shiurim.
Right.
So when you do kinyan kesef, you need to have a minimum shear. When you do hotza'ah on Shabbos, you need to have a certain amount of grains of wheat in order for it to be called hotza'ah. Right. So when you do kinyan, it has to be, when you do kinyan kesef, it has to be kesef, and that means it has to be at least a pruta. That is the minimum amount. But when you do Khalifin,
but does that mean not a ring?
A ring, you're giving it b'toras kesef. That's why the rabbi says, is this ring shaveh pruta? So that it's clear that you're giving it as kesef and not as Khalifin.
So it's just a question of that you're like it's in theory.
You could give the ring as Khalifin. You could give the ring as Khalifin, and then it wouldn't be valid.
In theory, it's exchanging something for the.
If the man gives the woman a ring and the woman gives the man a watch, then wait, and they do it as Khalifin.
Hang on.
Then they're not married.
The whole acquisition process is he is giving her something and she is giving him the exclusivity, right? That's what's happening, whether we call it kinyan or kesef, or whether we call it Khalifin, right? That's the exchange that would be hypothetically in Khalifin.
No. Wait. There's three ways to get married. One of them, when you do shtar, you're not giving her anything. But when you do kesef, you have to give her
Right,
kesef.
I'm talking
When
about
you do
kesef
kesef-
and the hypothetical chalifin. Yeah.
I mean, there's a big machloket. It's a very deep machloket, which I'm not going to get into, which is the money that you're giving, is it shaveh or is it bitora shaveh? Well, all right, I'm going to get there. Anyway, you give her a pruta, you're actuating the thing called kinyan kesef,
Okay.
and you actuate that by giving her a piece of kesef, a
It's a
thing that's
matana,
called
right?
kesef. What?
Okay.
Doesn't have
It's
to
a
be
thing that's
silver.
called kesef, but it doesn't actually have to be money. It can be an object.
It could be an object. It could be a ring.
So what would the chalifin be?
Halifin would theoretically, if I go back to not Sudar, but let's talk about the original Khalifin, the antique Khalifin, it would be, I gave her a cow and she gave me a donkey. And by that act of kinyan, I acquired her. In other words,
Wait, what? No, so if the analogy is to kinyan of a sadeh, or if the analogy is to buying something else, like that's, if we're learning it from sadeh, either I give you money.
yeah, well, I give you, how would you buy her a field?
How do
I give you I give you a teacup and you give me a spoon, and now I acquired your field. We were machlif something, and through the hachlafa, we made an acquisition on the field. You're saying no. You're saying, Rabbi Nachum, you're crazy. It's give the teacup and then I give you the field. But the field you can't give because it's
so
sitting
it's not
there.
like, it's not, so when you said you missed a step. When you said that originally it was exchanging animals, but now we want to acquire fields. So really the important part is that you're giving me something, and through my taking that something, I'm also acquiring the field.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's even simpler. But then I said another point, which is that the acquisition actually occurs when only one side of it happens. So the minute you give me the teacup and I take it, I've now acquired the field. I should give,
but that sounds like just like kesef to me. How is that different from kesef?
Because we're not doing value. We're not evaluating the monetary worth of the things.
Right, like with kesef,
It's very complicated. It's very complicated. I said it's a whole huge sugya. But for example, kinyan kesef. Let's say I say the field is worth. Let's say I do kinyan kesef. So the field is worth $1 million. I give you $10, and I say with this $10 I acquire the field. So you acquire the field at that moment. I now owe you 9,900,000. I owe you all that money, but the $10 I bought the field with a kinyan of kesef. Doesn't matter. It has to be at least a pruta. It doesn't have to be the value that we agreed upon to do the contract. But it's called kinyan kesef. It's a very weird concept.
Okay.
It's a very weird concept. It's not what we thought kinyan kesef was. It's not that like we come to a price and I give you, if I give you the whole price. In fact, we're gonna have a sugya like that, like in the what we saw. If I say I'm gonna give you 100 dinars and I start counting out and I give you 1 dinar, I'm already married on the first dinar in certain circumstances, depending on how I said dinar zu or not dinar, mayas, whatever, how I said it. So if I confused everybody or did I clarify? I don't know if I confused. But the point is there are these 3 magical ways of marrying, and a 4th way called there's many magical ways of acquiring things. And it has nothing to do with the obligation to pay. If I give you another example, can't
you say that the whole marriage structure is a kinyan chalipin to a certain extent? I'm giving you money right now, and in exchange, I owe you everything that I owe you through the marriage, right? So like clothing, sexual happiness, and food, and then you owe me other duties as a wife.
Well, remember, it's not. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it's. I don't know. I think it's an acquisition. I mean, we have different methods of acquisition. Now is a chov. In other words, the fact that maybe, first of all, the ketubah is what guarantees those rules, no?
Yeah,
But
but
her
without a
obligation,
ketubah,
the woman's obligations towards the man are because there was a kiddushin. You're saying that's thinking that she's giving to him, and he's again. It's not shaveh for a whole pruta. Well, you say I hear what you're saying. It's sort of like chalifin. Yeah, it is sort of like chalifin, but it's not considered chalifin. Let's take a break. But wait, so unless I left somebody confused at this point, if somebody's confused because maybe I said too many different things.
I have a question, but it's not, maybe it'll waylay us more than help us. I don't understand why we excluded chuppah in this case. If it's this variable, then why did chuppah get discarded so easily? Does that make things worse, or?
Well, why would you include? Well, I mean, he has this kal v'chomer that Rav Huna has a kal v'chomer that he learns out chuppah from, and we just have a question with not everybody agrees to that kal v'chomer, but why would you learn chuppah? Because why is that's not a normal form of kiddush of not a normal form of kinyan at all. Unless you want to say it's putting the again.
Isn't that the physical acquisition of the thing is bringing it into your domain?
There's kinyan HaEzer. There's something called kinyan HaEzer. Something goes into your HaEzer and then you acquire it. So you could say that, but nobody suggests that. No, nobody suggests that.
Yeah, no one says that you have to be clean the chuppah. Like the chuppah doesn't have to belong to you. So I don't see how kinyan HaEzer would take place under the chuppah, right?
No, the chuppah doesn't have to belong to you. Well, theoretically, yeah, that's a good question. I think there are some people that take the cheder yichud and they actually, the cheder yichud is supposed to belong to you. And when you rent the hall, you own the cheder yichud for that evening. So, and maybe the chuppah is also, you own it, you're renting it. Renting is called owning. It's owning for a period of time. You're a renter you rent an apartment for 10 years. You have that HaEzer, so you have kinyan HaEzer in your HaEzer if you rented it. So yes, you it's a problem. Yeah, if you have a cheder yichud, it's an interesting question. If you have a cheder yichud that's not yours, it's not really cheder yichud. You don't necessarily need a cheder yichud. The Sephardim don't do a cheder yichud. But I like.
They don't make a kinyan sudar either.
What?
They don't make a kinyan sudar either.
Nobody does. But
no, I've seen it done a lot.
On the ketubah, you mean?
Yeah,
ketubah, yeah.
Ketubah, yeah.
That's a chumrah. Anyway, let me just summarize or say the main point that I want to get at. It's sort of insulting to say that a woman is acquired like a field. A woman's like a field. It's not the nicest thing. Maybe it's not insulting, but maybe it is. But I like the Tosfos because he avoids that. He says simply, no, there are, we have this thing called kicha. It's a mystery to us what kicha is. And we look for other, we look for psukim in the Torah, which enlighten us about how to create marriage. And one thing we see is that we see the word kicha by Abraham. And that teaches us that kesef is a way to create marriage. And it's not necessarily even a kinyan. It's not necessarily even a kinyan. Because if it would be a kinyan, then we would include all forms of kinyan. It's not necessarily a kinyan. It's just that kicha is, a way of doing kicha is by giving money, and that we see by Abraham, and that's what the drasha tells us in Daf Dalet, right? The second drasha. It doesn't have the word kinyan. It just teaches us that kesef is a way of creating kiddushin, of marrying. And then we have other drashas for bia creating, but nobody does bia as a kind of kinyan. And shtar you can shtar we learned because of get, nothing to do with kinyan. We learned it from get, that since get is by a shtar, marriage can be a shtar. So actually what comes out according to Tosfos is that there's no such thing as kinyan by a woman. That's not what's going on at all. There's kiddushin by a woman. And there's three forms of kiddushin. One is kesef, one is, these three different ways, but they're not, none of them, we're never actually saying that any type of kinyan that works for a woman, because it wouldn't make sense to say that because it's not a kinyan. And I think that's a much more, comfortable statement to say. I don't like to be. I'm not interested in apologetics, but when the texts create apologetics, in my opinion, then I'm happy to pronounce them. I don't think here it's forced, but
it's implicit. Because you'd have to make a separation between that and other forms of kinyanim, because the Gemara very specifically says ele medata. She can't enter into this. Well,
kinyan also is midata. You don't.
No. But the object is inanimate. It doesn't. There's no possibility for that object or field to answer back. That's why you have to have tacit agreement that the woman is there and that she agrees to what she's doing. It's definitely not a form of kinyan. It's just, as you say, using the lashon of kicha to understand the mechanism by which marriage goes through.
Right.
And the field itself, I always see as Abraham buying a field for his wife.
Well,
It's not dafka just a sadeh. It's where the marata machpelah. So it has that kind of longevity, and it's about putting down roots in many respects.
But wait a second. Let's answer one more question. Why is the first drasha does mention kinyan? Not because we're trying to say that marriage is kinyan, because it's not. So why is the first drasha mention kinyan on Daf Bet? For a simple reason. Because the Mishnah says niknit, which is against everything that I'm saying, that it is kinyan. But really it's just a linguistic point that the first drasha is trying to say. Why can the Mishnah call it kinyan? Because by Abraham it was called kinyan. But I'm arguing with the Mishnah. Maybe the Mishnah didn't really mean it's kinyan. It's a metaphoric use of the word kinyan. Doesn't mean kinyan in the literal sense. It's just you're calling it kinyan in the lashon of the Mishnah, even though it's not really kinyan. It's a borrowed usage of the term. That's what I would say. All right. Let's take a break, and we'll come back to the tour. Okay. Sorry, we just started the recording. We just read the first section of the tour, and basically it's saying that there's a famous concept of matana al manat lachzir, which you're all familiar with probably from etrog and lulav. We say matana al manat lachzir is considered a matana. It's considered at the moment you have it, it's yours. Even though you have to return it, it's yours. So you might think, why shouldn't that work? If I give kesef, I'm doing kinyan kesef, I give it as almanat lachzir. It should work. Why doesn't it work? Eino kedushin, and we don't know why. So let's look at the Beit Yosef.
There's a difference between a matana tonight and a matana gemura.
Yeah. Well, first of all, right? Yes, but it's still a matana.
I would also say, by the way, if it's matana, then it also means it can't be. A lot of the cases we were reading about earlier say it was sort of in exchange for something. I'll give you this in exchange for you doing that, and that also sort of seems to undermine the matana gemura idea.
Yeah, but again, kesef. Remember, kesef, kinyan kesef is where I give you $1, and now I acquired the house. I now owe you the other $500,000, but I acquired it at the moment I gave you the $1. So that $1 could be given back, maybe. In other words, but I still acquired the house at that moment. I maybe have a debt, but so it should work. The matana, the Gemara says matana almanat lachzir shem matana or shmo matana. It's considered a matana. So why the tour doesn't say why it doesn't work? We're all familiar with why it doesn't work, but here, Ravni, read the Beit Yosef.
Sure. הכסף של הקידושין צריך שיתנהו לה במתנה גמורה, ואם נתנו לה על מנת שתחזירהו לו, אינן קידושין וכולי. מימרה בריש קידושין, ת"ו. הלך מנה על מנת שתחזירהו לי באישה אינה מקודשת, לפי שאין אישה נקנית בחליפין. ופרשו התוספות והראש, לפי שדרך הוא להחזיר הסודר.
So let's look at the Tosfot. Back to the Gemara. Let's look at the Tosfot here. So this is this Gemara that it starts about 15 lines from the bottom. Amarava hilach mana amandavav amabet hilach mana almanat she tachzireu li b'mecher lo kana be'isha. So now we give a list. B'mecher, buying land, ain't lo kana be'isha ain't no mikudesh. B'pidyon haben ain't v'no padui. B'truma yatsa yedei netina. In other words, he did the mitzvah. He created the kedusha of truma. He did do a truma. Vasur lasot came, but you shouldn't do this because mipnei shenirek kohen misai bebeit granot. It seems, I don't know if you can hear me when I'm reading. Can you hear me? Yeah. It seems like the kohen is being like paid to help. As Messiah is trying to ingratiate himself to the owner of the grain. Whatever. The point is, you're not allowed to give it in this way. There's a prohibition of a kohen trying to ingratiate himself to the owner by doing work for him for free, so that on the hopes that he'll get the truma. And this seems like that. Okay, and then we go on. The Gemara goes on. It says, "My kasava Rava." What did he think? He kasava matana amanat lachzir shma matana. Does he think that this matana is called a matana? So afilu kulunami, let them all work. V'i kasavar lo shma matana afilu trumanami lo. If it doesn't think it's called a matana, then it shouldn't work ever. What is this mixed up thing? Either it works or it doesn't work. Why? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. He says it's a matana. So what is this? This makes no sense. It is a matana. It should work. Because he says by the etrog, hilach etrog zeh almanat shetachzirei natlu v'chziru yatsa. He took it and gave it back. He's yatsa. So you see, at the moment that he owned the etrog, it was his. Kachtem lechem. It was his, and he's yatsa. Im lav lo yatsa. But if he doesn't give it back, then he's not yatsa because he didn't fulfill the tanai. Elam Ravashi. So Ravashi says, no, you got it all wrong. They all work except for women. Why? Because, in other words, it really is Shema Matan. And what's the reason it doesn't work for a woman? So what does that mean? It doesn't work. So look at the Yavni. Read the last Rashi on the page.
אלא אמר רב אשי, ודאי בכול הוא אמר רבא דקונה לבר מאישה כולי, והי לחליפין דמה כקניין מסודר, דאינו אלא אוחז בה ומחזירו.
Right. So you emphasize one word. Which word did you emphasize?
Dame.
Exactly. Why do you emphasize that word?
Because the point is that this transaction all of a sudden is starting to look like Khalifin instead of Kinyan Kesef.
Right. Even though it really is.
Even though if you break it down to each moment, you could say that it seems like it should be okay, except that if you look
at what's going on here, it sounds like it really works. It's just that it's, I mean, even from the Rashi, it's dummy to something else. It's not that something else,
right? But
it's similar to something else. But so it really should work. Okay, so look at Tosfos. Tosfos is going to say it. I think more explicitly. So here, as Sarah, maybe you want to read. Levarmi Isha.
Okay. Levarmi Isha she'ein Isha nikneit b'chalifin, ve'im tomar b'mai damu lechalifin. Im mishum nechalifin hadare, hab chalifin gufayhu amar b'nedarim perak hashutafim, itafisla mitzveh. So you might think, but in what way is this like chalifin? Is it that you like returned it, or you're returning
that normally by chalifin you return it.
You return it.
And here also you're returning it.
Here also you return it, but it says in Nedarim that once you grab it, you've got it. Essentially, it's yours.
No, wait. I think I want to read it. But chalifin itself, it tells us in Nedarim that if you don't return it, the eid tafis, if you don't return it, you hold on to it, mitafes, it's a valid, you can keep it. That's what I was saying before. You can keep it. You don't have to return it. In other words, that you're saying it's like chalifin, it's not like chalifin, it's like kinyan sudar, where sudar is a virtual form of, a modernized form of chalifin, but chalifin gufa is chalifin, you're allowed to keep it, and even in kinyan sudar you can keep it. So why are you telling me it's dummy? It's not dummy. It's not similar at all, because it's not essential to chalifin that you give it back. It's just in practice done that way.
But it's not essential to this matana either, right?
It is.
In other words, if I don't give it back, the matana, it's like the matana never happened.
Yeah, it's a gezela. That's Rambam. If we're going to see the Rambam, how he says it.
Right.
If you don't give it back, then you didn't fulfill the Tanai, then you don't own it. Vanira, go on.
But then you don't have to wait for the Tanai to like kick in. Like if I say I'm going to give it back to you on Tuesday, I don't have to wait till I'm not married until Tuesday, right?
Right.
Or am I?
It would be very problematic. It could be very problematic. Right? Matana, you have to give it back to me within the next 10 years. And then we're married for 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, you don't give it back. Then all of a sudden, we're not married. We never were married. Could be a way to avoid gunot. But yeah, it's a very weird thing where your whole marriage would be talui ba'avir, would be, because anytime you broke and if it would be amanat lachzir mataishahu, then sometime, then you could never violate that. You could keep it for a long time. Anyway, go on though. Vanira. So he says it's not really dummy because the idea of returning it is not essential to chalifin, and yet it is essential to matana al-HaEzer. That's essential to it. So he says, so go on.
Venirelri, delav halifinhu. Maybe it's just not halifin at all. Umi de rabbananhu, delo havu kiddushin, lifishe derech ha'olam lahachzir halifin. So it's not real chalifin, but
in other words, exactly. The Gemara told us that chalifin doesn't work, and you might think that this Gemara, if you just read it, it says lefisha ein isha niknet b'chalifin. It is chalifin, and the Gemara is saying it's chalifin, and chalifin doesn't work because we know that chalifin doesn't work because we already said that. But you say no, it actually does work. It's not chalifin at all. It's not chalifin at all, and it's just rabbinically that it doesn't work.
This reader that Tosfot is putting emphasis on the lefi. It's saying lefi is an essential word there in the Gemara, right?
Why? How do you explain yourself? What do you mean?
It's like because it's like a gzera on the chalifin as opposed to if it were just the varmisha she'ein isha niknet b'chalifin, you would think, oh, because this is chalifin, but it's lefisha. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading.
Okay. Maybe you're more sensitive to the language than I am, but yeah, it could be. You're right. All right, but go on. The nearer.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Who delo have a kiddushin lefisha derech ha'olam lachzer chalifin. So midrabanan we say that chalifin that this doesn't constitute kiddushin because the like general practice is to return the thing you did in chalifin. V'hane ke'en halifin dame ve'anti lememar isha nikneit b'chalifin hilkach ifkahu rabbanan lekiddushin mina. So you might have thought. If we were to allow this, then you might have come to think that Khalifin would be allowed. And so
Right. You're right. And then you would do something else, which would be really Khalifin.
And that would be bad. So we don't want to do that. So we're just going to stop you from going down this.
And then what's the last line here that you just read? No. So that's enough.
Right. So for this is why we don't allow midirabanan, we don't allow kiddushin.
Well, no, I would translate if afka'ina, I don't know exactly, I think what it means, afka'inahu, we uproot it, we disrupt, we say that it's invalid. In other words, miduraita, I'll say it like this, miduraita, it's marriage. But the rabbis, al-dat, the rabbanan, everybody gets married according to the opinion of the Beis Din. And the Beis Din has the power to say, this is invalid. In other words, the Torah says it worked, and the rabbis say it doesn't work. The rabbis are uprooting. In other words, it's almost like you married, and then it got ripped from its roots out.
Is that really, I was wondering about this, can it really be saying that? Or is it just saying, lechatchila, we don't do it this way?
No. It's saying, if you do it this way, the rabbis are telling you not married, and you don't even need a get.
How can they do that?
Yeah, I'm saying this. That's what I want you to see here. That's what they can do. This is a principle that you can uproot kiddushin from Ikara, from its beginning. We don't
it's surprising that they don't say she's safek mekudeshet. If you've done it, you need to.
It's not a suffix. It's not a suffix. Sure, for sure you are married. There's no suffix here. You're for sure married. The only problem is that the rabbis say they uproot it. They destroy this marriage so that nobody should ever think that you can get married by Khalifin. Because people would start marrying by Khalifin, and then they wouldn't really be married. I mean, that's what the Tosfos is saying. In other words, the alternative, and that's what Rashi is really saying. You think about it, that's what Rashi is saying. It's like Sudar, and therefore get rid of it. So it's valid. It's not Sudar. So it is valid, Rashi is saying also. There's not a machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos. Tosfos is just explaining it more clearly, in my opinion. And they're uprooting the Kiddushin. No? Is it troubling? People are troubled? They should be troubled. It is a little bit troubling, but it's a principle. Rambam has a different way of learning it. I think that the Tur is going to quote the Rambam. So let's go back to the Tur. I think he's quoting the Rambam. Yeah. Who wants to wait? Yavni, go back. Yavni, continue in the Tur. We're Lexi. We're in the Tur right at the beginning, in the Beit Yosef.
Wait, you want me to go on in the Beit Yosef?
Yeah, sorry, in the Beit Yosef. So that's in my Beit Yosef. I underlined in the in what Yavni already read. Lefichach if ku Rabbanan l'Kiddushin, they uprooted the Kiddushin. And look, he says even better. You see, if you look in the Beis Yosef, he's even stronger than the way he proves that what I'm saying is right. He says even stronger. Af al gav de miduraita havye mikudeshet. Even though you're 100% married according to the Torah. this matana almanat lachzir.
Should I go on?
Yeah.
וזה לשון הרמב"ם בפרק ה' אינה מקודשת בין החזירה בין לא החזירה, שאם לא החזירתו לא נתקיים התנאי, ואם החזירתו הרי לא נהנית ולא הגיע לידה כלום. Should I just keep going?
No, so explain.
So the Rambam explains, so he says that she's not Mekudeshet because, so we either have that she returns it or that she doesn't return it. If she does return it, then she hasn't gotten anything, and therefore there was no Kiddushin. And if she does return it, then if she doesn't return it, then the Tnai wasn't met, and
she never really got it.
And the Matana didn't really happen.
Exactly. So in other words, the Rambam is saying, according to the Rambam, is she married to Raita or not?
According to the she is not married to Raita.
Right. So there's a machlokas. We see here's a machlokas Rishonim. If you do a matana almanat lachzir, according to Tosfos, midoraita you're married, midorabanan it's uprooted, and according to the Rambam, you're not married at all. What is the Rambam's logic? He says either you it's a matana almanat lachzir. If you don't return it, then you never really legitimately had that thing, so you never really got anything. You're a thief, and therefore it doesn't count. That's if you don't return it. And if you do return it, then he says a weird thing. Then he says lo nehenet, and I underline the word nehenet here. Or lo nehenet. You never really got anything. The Rambam seems to be putting in, he's inserting a new concept that you have to have hana'ah, which we do see in the Gemara about all kinds of hana'ot. But wait, Ruben, you want to say something?
Well, so technically, according to Rambam, in a case where she has hana'ah, so therefore it would work.
Oh,
Right,
so look at the Darkei Moshe bet.
As long as she's keeping the conditions of the tonight, which is to return it.
Right.
But then she's still not getting hana'ah, except she's making this guy happy. But
No, but assuming, let's say that he lends her a car, right? And she manages to take the car and drive to, like, I don't know, to New York, back and forth, and gives it back. She has
to meet her boyfriend.
If she had hana'ah, right. In other words, the Rambam seems to be overlooking something, which is she has hana'ah, but what's the answer? Can you give an answer? She maybe has hana'ah for that year. You know, here's this, you can have my washing machine for 3 months, you know, and meanwhile you enjoyed washing your clothes with it. So what do you mean she didn't have hana'ah? So how can you answer that according to the Rambam? How can you defend the Rambam? Can anybody defend the Rambam? I mean, I got the idea from something that I read.
Because he didn't say. Oh, maybe this is. I think this is what the Rabbi Yochanan says. Because he didn't say Mekudeshet on the hana'ah of this. He said Mekudeshet on the acquisition of this. And
right. He didn't say I'm marrying you with the pleasure you derive from this washing machine. He said the washing machine itself is the kesef. I'm giving you this money, and that's not called giving money. I mean, well, it's very weird. It's very weird what the Rambam is saying, because on the one hand, shma matana, it is a matana. But on the other hand, since you didn't have hana'ah from it, it's like this new thing that the Rambam is inventing. So it seems like the Rambam is inventing this new thing that the woman has to have hana'ah from the kesef. It's interesting. It requires, a brisker to come up with the source for this idea. But I mean, we'd have to. It's an interesting question where the Rambam comes up with this. But that's what he's saying. But let's go on. Read a little bit further, because now we're going to see this explicitly talked about a little bit, sort of. So go on in the Beit Yosef.
Oh, that's me.
כתב רבנו ירוחם, יש מפרשים שאם נתן לה מתנה לזמן ידוע ואמר לה תהא מקודשת לי בהיא הנאה שאת נהנית באותו זמן דהווה מקודשת ויש מפרשים דאינה מקודשת וראשון נראה עיקר. עד כאן לשון רבנו ירוחם.
So that's saying that I did. So then, like, what if he did say explicitly be mikudeshetly for the rental of this washing machine rather than or for this washing machine for the
Not for the
enjoyment
rental, because rent,
over a
yeah,
year.
whatever, for the hana'ah of using it, yeah.
Hana of using the washing machine over a year. There are those who say it's good. There are those who say
Right.
it's no good.
I mean, the truth is, it's very logical. And then he says it makes sense that it does work. And it's very logical. If you learn all the sugyas and kiddushin, you'll see that it repeats itself. This idea of hana'ah all the time. We talk about hana'ah of it's all the time mentioned hana'ah there. So you could argue that the Rambam would agree that if you said it in that way, it would work. You could argue that. So I would say that it's not 100%. The Rambam you probably could also argue that he would not agree, even so.
I mean, if you want to be a brisker on the Rambam, he said that basically Rambam said the so as soon as she gives it back, she kind of loses the Hana. That's how you could read the Rambam, and then Rabbi Yochanan would end.
No, but right. But we were saying, but maybe that's only because he tried to marry, like Yavni was saying, he tried to marry her with the chefetz itself. But if he had said it as hana'ah,
yeah, but introduce the lashon of hana even with the chefetz itself, right? So why would he introduce hana if he's mikudash, like if he's mikudash her with the chefetz, right? That has no shayches, like has no connection whatsoever.
Right.
So the fact that it introduces it means that for him, so long as you give back an object, the hana that you get from the object is not a real hana.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I think something like that. It's very nice. Something like that. That would be the defense. That would be how the Rambam would not agree with Rabbeinu Yochanan. Yeah, I think you could say that. That hana'ah, real hana'ah, is only when you have the thing. Okay.
Does that mean the Rambam would hold that you can't do kiddushin on something perishable or consumable? And like, what happens if she?
You owned it at that time.
Well,
I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's problematic. I tend to think that it's easier to defend that the Rambam would agree with Rabbeinu Yerucham. It's certainly easy to defend that. But yes, according to that other opinion, you would have to deal with that question also. According to the idea that he doesn't agree with Rabbeinu Yerucham, then you'd have to try to explain, well, what's the difference if I give it back or if it dies? Or if it,
I mean, if it dies, you owned it, right? That would be the difference.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go for it.
Yeah, something like that. Let's look at the Beit Yos, the Beit Chadash. Sorry, the Bach. There's another quote of Rabbeinu Yerucham. I just wanted to show there's two different Rabbeinu Yeruchams that are mentioned here. Where is this Bach? It's like, I don't know. It's kind of in the middle of the. It's in Aleph, towards the end of Aleph in the Bach. It says. Here it says mihu. You see, there's in parentheses. There's like daf, taf, reish, kaf, bet, 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 dalet, and then afterward it says umihu mashma vaday de ledivrei hakol im natan la matana lezman yedua. He gave her a matana for 30 days. You can use my washing machine for 30 days. Va'amar le beferush harei at mikudeshet li ba'hahi hana'ah. Shatnet va'otozman the mikudeshet. So it's the same. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said it's different. It's the same. V'ken pasacha Rabbeinu Yerucham umavio b'shulchan aruch. This is the point I wanted to. The next part. V'da. And no. Shekol zeh. Here's going to say an amazing thing. Da. Shekol zeh tzarich. Are you guys with me? You have the place? Yeah. Okay. V'da. Shekol zeh tzarich lefaresh b'dekafle tanai. All this has to be where you did kefel of your tanai. Now we have this idea that when this idea of kefel tanai, maybe you're familiar with it. I'll review quickly that when what is it? Reuven and Chetzi Sheva Menashe and Gad had wanted to say an Eber Yarden, they agreed to fight, and they had to say, you have to, basically the idea of kefil, they said their tanai in a double way. What's a double way? You have to say something like this. It's like if you're a computer programmer, you'll like this. Because you say, if, you don't just say like this, we will come, if I do come, we'll get to keep this land if we do come and fight. And if we don't come and fight, then we lose the land. And as you don't just say one side, even though one side theoretically says it all. You say, I'll marry you if you, this is your matana, as long as you give it back. Kefel tanai would mean, and if you don't give it back, then it's not a matana. It's kind of redundant. You already said it's a matana only if you give it back. You have to do kefel tanai, and if you don't give it back, it's not a matana. So he says, you have to say that we're talking about a case where he did kefel tanai. Aval b'delo kafle. I'm back to the Bach. If he didn't do kefel tanai, the kafle the tanai, because inyan mikudeshet, then it for sure works. Why? Shaharei ain't tzrichin lachzir klal, because if he didn't do kefel tanai, then it's not a valid tanai. And then, what does it mean it's not a valid tanai? You didn't really make it tanai. So then it's just a matana. Then it's a matana without a tanai. The tanai batel, v'maaseh kayam. The tanai is like it's not there, but the maaseh of giving, that happened.
But then he wouldn't want that. He wouldn't want that. He's saying, I'll marry you on this condition, and she's not fulfilling the condition.
But he didn't do a kefel tanai. He doesn't know the Talmud.
Whether he knows it or not, he wants something back, and he's not getting it.
Yeah, but ignorance is no excuse. But he doesn't know the rules. He got messed up.
But once he marries her, he's got his washing machine back anyway, so he's all good.
It works out, and also it's basically like, okay, yeah, he wanted his thing back, but like he wanted to be engaged to her. She accepted the thing, and he didn't make it good enough tonight, so he doesn't have to like the conditions of the engagement that were in his ideal don't need to be fulfilled, but like the thing he was intending is still done.
Right. The thing he intended. What do you mean by that?
As in, like, so if his primary goal is to like become engaged to this person,
and
like
because
he's
like
cheap or some other reason, I don't know, it's precious to him.
What's about like this? He said to her, "I want to marry you with this ring that's my grandmother's ring, because it's very sentimental to me. But I have to give it back to my grandmother. Or I have to give it back to my mother because she wants to use it. She wants to use it for her other son, for my brother. He's gonna also use it. So give it back."
Part of the idea is that if it's not kefel tanai, he can't have felt so strongly about the tanai, right? That like, if I really, really want my grandmother's ring back, I'll be like, okay, be mikudeshet on the condition, like if you like return it to me, then you'll be mikudeshet, and if not, no, because I really do need to have my grandmother's ring. And if he doesn't say that, then it's like, okay, like yes, he would prefer to have the thing back, but like he wouldn't rather have the thing back than like be engaged to her, basically.
Okay. So look in Daf Vav. Look at Daf Vav, back to Daf Vav in Kiddushin. We're doing too much Gemara, but I want to show you the range of opinions. I always like to show the range of opinions. So now we saw this very nice idea that kefel tanai without it is no good. But it's not so simple. If you're a baki in Shas like Tosfos, you will have issues with that. So look at this Tosfos on Vav Amud Bet in Kiddushin, the third Tosfos from the bottom, Lo HaEzer Lo Yatsa. That's where he's talking about
etrog.
About the etrog. If he didn't give it back, he's Lo Yatsa. So here, Ruben, why don't you read this? I just want to read a little of it.
Sure. לא החזירו לא יצא, ואם תאמר, אמר לא יצא, הלא הווה תנאי כפול. Why is it not יוצא? Well, there wasn't any תנאי כפול, ויש לומר.
Oh, wait, stop. Don't go too fast, because we're not going to read, because now he just said, wait a second, there's no Tanai Kaful. So he doesn't give it back. Who cares? The Tanai is invalid. That's what the Rebbeinu Yerucham just said. The Rebbeinu Yerucham just said is not Tanai kaful, not valid. So
The first still married, right? So
the etrog, he doesn't give the etrog back. But he didn't need to give it back because there was no real Tanai here. So he should be Yotze even if he doesn't give it back. So what is he? V'yesh lomar.
V'yesh lomar de'ikat tnai de'lo ba'i kaful. So in this case, there is like a tnai that doesn't need to be kaful.
Right. Now, wait, let me stop you. Sorry, I have to just emphasize all these points. There are some times that Tanai, there are some times that we don't need a Tanai kaful. It's not a rule that is 100%. Sometimes we can be satisfied with a non-fully repeated Tanai. So go ahead.
Like it's so obvious that you don't need a Tanai kaful type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to even say, I think he says here, maybe later on, that he's going to even say that you don't even need, sometimes you don't even just say anything. It's just obvious. When I give you my like even they say, if some people are very machmir where they give somebody the etrog by the way, it's only on the first day that you need to do this because on the other days it's all the Rabbanan and you don't have the din of lechaktem lechem. But on the first day, some people just say, here, use my etrog. And well, actually, if I already am yotze with it, then it doesn't even matter, right? But I've already yotze with it, so now I can give it to you as a matana. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be any tonight. But even sometimes you don't say a word, you just give it to the guy, and it's obvious that you meant that as a matana, not l'achzir. So he says, "Yesh lomar de'ikat tonight the lo boi kaful." Okay, go on.
So here, his intention was that his friend would bless the etrog, and that's the end of it. You don't need a Tanai kaful.
Right. You go a little bit more.
So basically, bringing you a story.
Right. This is a whole story. I'll just summarize it for you. The whole story there that he wanted to go to Eretz Israel and he sold all of his things, and then it turns out he couldn't go. So he demands all of his stuff back, even though he never said, I'm only selling this to you on the condition that I'm going to Eretz Israel. He never said anything. He never said anything, he just sold it. But it was obvious that he sold it because he was going to Eretz Israel. It's obvious that, and it was obvious that if he wouldn't go, he would get it back. So you see, he's bringing this Gemara saying that you don't always need a Tanai kaful. It could even be no Tanai at all. So I'm just pointing at the range of opinions. Rebbeinu Yerucham says it wouldn't work, but it seems from this Tosfos that even without a Tanai kaful, it's as if we have a Tanai kaful, and therefore we need the rabbis to uproot it because it's really valid. Because if she returned it, whatever, it's really valid. Whatever. Either way. What?
Rabbeinu Yerucham said that since we don't have a Tanai kaful, even if she didn't give it back, she's still married, right?
Right. And
So
Tosfos would say, even if she didn't give it back, she's not married because we don't need a Tanai kaful here. Because maybe it's obvious.
I just feel
or maybe it's not obvious. Or maybe
I feel like it's super not obvious.
Right, exactly. Maybe Lexi's right. Maybe it's super not. Maybe the intro case is obvious, and maybe here it's super not obvious, and maybe here he agrees with Rebbeinu Yerucham. Maybe he's just saying by the etrog.
No, I disagree.
Yeah, like the etrog thing. Yeah, like the etrog thing.
Or maybe he agrees with Rebbeinu Yerucham because in this case by the etrog it's true, but by marriage it's super not obvious. You generally give it to her.
The pluses and minuses are very different. Like for my etrog, like it's like, do I care more about like what I'm accomplishing in giving this than like what I would lose by not getting it back? And like most people, if they haven't been yotze on their etrog yet, like probably don't care enough about you being yotze on your mitzvah that they're willing to like make that impossible for them to do it, right? Whereas like a lot of people presumably care a decent amount about getting engaged to somebody, such that unless it's like some unbelievably precious thing you've given them, like probably they do care more about being engaged to that person than having this thing.
I don't see it as a matter of care. I see it as a matter of principle, right? It's the same principle. Well, like,
no,
it doesn't matter whether you care more about one or the other.
Wait, but just to defend Lexi, I think that Tosfos is not saying that you never need a Tanai kaful. He's saying it depends on the circumstances. And he's specifically saying that by etrog, that's a circumstance where you don't need it. But he's not saying that in marriage is a place where you don't need it. So he doesn't say that. And therefore it's an open question, but I think it's certainly reasonable to say that in marriage it's different from etrog. So he could be agreeing with Rabbeinu Yerucham. So I take that point. But I'm just pointing out, really, for your general education, I mean, whatever, that there is this concept. This tosos is important. Is what they would call a Yesoda Dika. What is it? Yesoda Dika tosos. It's a tosos that has principles that you should know, that you don't always need a Tanai Kaful. But I think you're right. It may not have any bearing on our case. Okay, so let's go back to the, well, we have a few minutes. I don't know if we can do anything more. Yeah, let's read one more. Here, Yavni, why don't you read the next tour? Oh, no, you know what we should do? Let us look in the Shulchan Aruch. That's what I want to do. Look in the Shulchan Aruch on this same Seif Aleph. So we are in Kaf Tet. And it's November. Kaftet. So Yavni, why don't you read for us the first halacha? Why am I?
I'm just get into it. האומר לאישה, הרי את מקודשת לי בדינר זה, על מנת שתחזירהו לי אינה מקודשת. הגה. אבל האישה...
So what did we paskin?
She's not מקודשת.
She's not מקודשת. Okay, הגה.
הגה, אבל האישה שנתנה לאחד מתנה על מנת להחזיר לה לאחר 30 יום, כדי לקדשה בה תוך 30 ונתן לה מתוך 30 לקידושין, הווה מקודשת.
So this is really something we didn't discuss yet, and we didn't see the sources for this, but this is very weird. What is the case?
She has an object, she gives it to him, and on the condition that he return it to her within 30 days, and within those 30 days, he uses it to Mekadesh her.
To Mekadesh her. In other words, she gives, this is your, you're marrying a very poor man, so you give him a ring, and you say, give me back this ring in 30 days, but in the 30 days, feel free to use it to marry me. And then he comes and marries you after 14 days with your own ring. And it's a matana la'almanat lahachzir. Why is this going to work? Because it's no longer similar. What was the whole reason that if kiruhu the rabbanan? Because it's no longer similar to Khalifin at all. Because at the time that he gives it to her, he doesn't say anything about Tanaim, about giving it back.
Is it also because she doesn't have to give it back? In this case, he gives it back to her, but she never has to give it back. So therefore, it's not like Khalifin Michal.
Right.
And she's getting hana from it.
She gets it, and once she gets it, it's hers. Exactly. It's just like, in other words, it's almost like the Ramah is telling you, don't think that any time you have a matana almanat lahachzir, it's going to not work. It's only when the matana lahachzir is from him to her. But if there was a case where it was the other way around, then it would work. It's not like
Kushya and the Rambam, because then she's only getting it. She's only getting the hana'ah, the special hana'ah from him, giving it for whatever the remainder of 30 days is, because she would have gotten it back anyway.
No, but the Rambam
but the Rambam's only problem is that she doesn't get to keep it, and here she gets to keep it. So even according to the Rambam, it would be okay.
The only question is, what about the monetary value, right? Does it have monetary value since it belongs to her? So he's not giving her anything. He's not giving her any kesef, really.
He's not giving her any kesef. Well, you're saying he's not giving her anything that
has value.
He
that
gave
has
it to her.
Value.
He's giving her that ring. The ring itself has value, and he's giving her the ring.
She gets Hana'ah from the Kiddushin. Isn't that the point?
What?
Yeah. She gets Hana'ah from the Kiddushin. Isn't that the point?
Well, it's because it's betoch the shloshim yom. In other words, she got it back early.
Well, that's what I mean. Is it's only for that time period,
or not
really a gift to her.
I don't even know if it's 1 second before the 30 days is over, and he hands it to her. Maybe there's no real hana'ah there, or a pruta's worth of hana'ah there isn't. But it still works because she's getting, at the moment of the giving, she's getting something and she's getting to keep it. It's not B'Torah's hana'ah, it's B'Torah's the object, and is getting it. You see, and then the Rambam wouldn't have a problem with it because she gets to keep it. So the
Rambam didn't say anything about getting to keep it. The Rambam said that wasn't the Rambam's language.
But the Rambam said that when she gives it back, she doesn't get to have hana. Therefore, you can
doesn't get to exactly. I like the way
she has hana.
She doesn't get to have hana. She will be able to have hana now because she'll have it. Okay. Read the next piece.
יש אומרים דאם נתן מתנה על מנת להחזיר ואמר לה בהנאה זו שאת נהנית תוך הזמן הרי את מקודשת לי הרי קידושין.
Right. So there's that Rabbeinu Yerucham coming to us. That the hana is going to work, even though you're going to have to give it back. You're going to give back the matana, but at the moment, I'm not giving it to you on the Torah of the Chefetz, but on the Torah of the Hana'ah, the category of the Hana'ah, and that will work. Because there's all kinds. We're going to see. You've seen already, I suppose, the classic case of somebody giving to a woman can give to a man, and she enjoys the fact that he received it, and that Hana'ah. She can get, he's giving to her the hana'ah of having accepted her gift, and that can be a marriage. But you have to say, with the hana'ah that you received from me accepting your gift. So once we turn it into a language of hana'ah, it'll work. And that's the basis of that Rabbeinu Yerucham. All right, we'll stop here. We did at least Sif Aleph. Which is a good sif to do. It's an important sif. It enters us into the whole topic. So next time we'll spend one more week on this and do the rest, whatever we can accomplish, whatever we can succeed in accomplishing the rest of these CEFs. Yeah, okay. Hope it was a good shir. I enjoyed being with you. Laila Tov.
Okay. Rav Nachum, one quick point of interest.
Yeah.
Tisha B'Menashe never